Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to The Revolution. I'm your host, Megan Connor, and today we are going to be talking about the sentencing of Brian Walshe. I know that this happened a long time ago, but this has been a difficult one for me. For those of you who did not follow the case with me, I came into the Brian Walshe case not knowing much other than the basic details. So I watched court every day, pretending to be a juror, only listening to the testimony that the jurors heard, and I arrived at the conclusion that Brian Walshe was guilty. Once the verdict from the real jury came back, I started digging beyond what I heard in court. And when I finally did the deep dive and discovered that the earliest record that we have of Brian and Ana's relationship was that in 2014, he threatened to kill Ana and her friend, and that she made a police report about it, my entire focus shifted into seeing Ana as yet another victim of domestic violence who never got to escape. The second instance that we have of their relationship is Ana's own Instagram account, which is public, by the way. She posted a picture there in 2018, which I will share with you after we listen to the sentencing. And I want to talk about domestic violence and how it can escalate in this way. Brian was convicted of murdering his wife and dismembering her, but the roots of his violence go back years, starting with the early threats and ending in police allegations that the house itself that they were living in looked like there was evidence of violence going on in the house. So I want to watch the sentencing. It's very brief, and then deep dive into the broader issue of escalating domestic violence with some resources and threat assessments that I think are going to help individuals out there if they or someone they love is experiencing this. So in the sentencing, again, as I said, it's very brief. The defense and the prosecution both gave their arguments for sentencing. There was only one victim impact statement read. The rest of them were submitted via written format. And then the judge had some choice words for Mr. Walshe before she passed the sentencing. And then we actually can see him walking out of court. So let's go to that first. I just want to make sure that I have my headphones in so we don't get echoes.
Mitrovic to address the court.
We'll start with the Commonwealth's presentation of whatever victim impact statements that you wish me to hear orally.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Commonwealth would ask Alexandra Dimitrovic to address the court. Would you like her at the witness stand or from the podium?
In the witness stand.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning. You may be seated.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Your Honor. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexandra Dimitrievich, and I'm the sister of Ana Walshe. I am here today to represent myself and my mother. I want to share with the court how losing my sister in January 2023 has forever changed our lives and left us with an unbearable emptiness. Losing my sister Ana so unexpectedly has altered our world in ways we never imagined. Ana was not just my sister. She was someone I grew up with, someone who knew me in ways no one else ever will. I struggle with the grief that comes without warning, hoping every morning that this is all just a terrible dream. The most painful part of this loss is knowing her children must now grow up without their mother's hand to to hold. They now face a lifetime of milestones, big and small, where her absence will be deeply and painfully felt. This tragedy has also devastated my mother. She has developed severe depression and chronic exhaustion. Every single day, she carries the weight of losing her daughter. Our entire family is still learning how to live with this emptiness. Holidays and birthdays are now silent reminders of her absence. Because of the circumstances of my sister's death, we were denied the opportunity to say a final goodbye and to observe our customs, adding a layer of profound, unfinished grief to our loss. Ana was a mother, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. Her life was unfairly taken. We miss her beyond words. While we recognize that no sentence can bring her back, we ask the court to consider the permanent, long-lasting impact this loss has had on our family, especially her children. We stand in agreement with the Commonwealth and their recommendations. Finally, I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to the investigators, the Commonwealth's office, and everyone who has worked tirelessly on this case. Your dedication to seeking justice for my sister has provided our family with a sense of support during our darkest hours. Your Honor, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share the full weight of this incomprehensible act. Ana will never be forgotten. We will carry her light and her memory with us forever. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Careful.
Yes. Sorry.
Recommendation, the written recommendation, but I'll have you state it on the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Commonwealth is requesting that the defendant be sentenced to a series of consecutive sentences on the charges to run from and after his federal case, in which he received a sentence of 37 months in February of 2024. The first charge that the Commonwealth would seek an incarceration component on is count 003, and that the defendant be sentenced to 2.5 to 3 years. The second charge would be that he, on the misleading 002, to run from and after 003, that he receive a sentence of 18 to 20 years. And that the third charge, the murder, and the first degree, that the defendant be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole to run from and after 003 and 002. And Your Honor, if I may be heard in our argument.
Please.
Thank you, Your Honor. When you look at the facts of these three charges, each one calls for a harsh penalty. If you look at the illegal conveyance of a body, the defendant did not just, the person that he illegally conveyed was his wife and the mother of his 3 children. And he did it by removing her remains from the family home and placing them in buckets, in garbage bags, in dumpsters around the Commonwealth. He denied, as you just heard, her family the opportunity to have any customs or burial. There is no grave, there is no memorial. And he did this all in an effort to destroy evidence. On the misleading component, Your Honor, while we do mention the potential of probation, we put that in there only as data so that you understand the efforts that went in to trying to find Ana based on the defendant's series of lies. These lies were all done in an effort to cover up his crime and destroy evidence. We're also, while we put in that, we are not seeking a probation sentence, but we put it in there so the court, if it wanted to contemplate one, understood there was an option to do it that would prevent the defendant potentially from trying to profit from this.
So the only mechanism for me, as I see it anyway, the only mechanism for me under the restrictions of state law
Yes, Your Honor.
it's an either or situation. That is, either I incarcerate him for an additional period of time, either concurrent or consecutive, or I put him on probation following the life sentence, or maybe it even starts today. But the only way that restitution can be achieved on count 2 is through a probationary sentence. So I don't think there's any other mechanism for me doing that. So I don't know how you achieve that goal if without a probationary sentence and mandating it as a condition of probation. And so I wanted the Commonwealth to be clear with me. You're making note of it in passing, but you are not asking me to put him on a probationary sentence. Is that correct?
We are not, Your Honor. It is data that you can use in order to determine the scope of his lies in which the police relied on them. And you can see the costs that went into investigating the disappearance of Ana Walshe, but we are not asking for probation on this matter.
And the same question with regard to the issue of restitution that I heard rumblings of yesterday.
Yes, Your Honor.
Same result?
Same result. It is, again, it's data for you in determining your sentence, but we are not asking for it.
All right, just wanted to be clear on that.
Thank you, Your Honor. And then on the murder, again, this was the murder of his wife and the mother of his 3 children. And the cover-up of this murder, Your Honor, deserves some analysis. If you look at the first internet search, which occurred at approximately 4:52 a.m. on the 1st, how to dispose of a body, and how they evolve into eventually 11:24 a.m., how to dispose of body parts after a murder, it appears the defendant at this point in time is committed to getting rid of evidence of the crime. And it leads to the shopping sprees later on that night at Lowe's and CVS and Stop and Shop. However, if you look at the internet searches on the 2nd, how to dismember a body, and is a hacksaw the best tool to dismember a body? It's a reasonable inference he hasn't started the action yet. And it results in the second shopping spree to Home Depot that afternoon, which means that Ana Walshe has been dead in that basement for over 24 hours. The same home his children are in, the same home the babysitter's at, the same home his mother has come to visit. And in the evening between the 2nd and the 3rd is when the dismemberment occurs. And on the 3rd, we see him going to dumpsters, getting rid of the remains. In the defendant's sentencing memo, and I want to note, the defendant was represented by 2 excellent lawyers who are titans in this industry, who I have the highest respect for. They say the Commonwealth's recommendation is inhumane. I suggest that that's not the appropriate word choice, because if we were to look at that word, I would suggest that that describes the defendant's actions and the depravity of his actions of murdering his wife, dismembering her, and getting rid of her remains by throwing her away like garbage. The question might become whether or not this is a cruel and unusual punishment that the Commonwealth is recommending. And I direct your honor to one case. It's Cepulonis, CEPULONIS versus the Commonwealth, 384 Mass 495 at 497. It's a 1981 case. To reach the level of cruel and unusual punishment, the punishment must be so disproportionate to the crime that it shocks the conscience and offends the notion of human dignity. I don't know if that's possible in this case, Your Honor, because human dignity was completely offended by the defendant's actions and how he treated his wife, how he disposed of her, and how he robbed her family and friends of the opportunity to bury her. There is no death certificate. The church will not allow a funeral to go on at this point in time. We are working on trying to work with the ME's office to see if we can get a death certificate to issue now based on the conviction and based on the plea. And when I looked behind me after the closing arguments, I realized that that was the closest thing that those people had come to a wake, because they never got together. to mourn her. And that happened 3 years later. So with that, Your Honor, the Commonwealth does make a punishment that we recommend to you. We recognize it's harsh, but we think it's appropriate based on the facts. And I appreciate your time, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hear from the defense.
With respect to the first-degree murder conviction, although we made it clear from our memorandum that we do object to a life without parole sentence based on state and U.S. constitutional grounds, based on the Eighth Amendment, we understand the court has no discretion. With respect to indictments 2 and 3, you do. I think inhumane is the right word, respectfully. To sentence someone to prison posthumously to send a message is humane. It's dehumanizing him. Regardless of what happened in this courtroom, regardless of the convictions, regardless of what anyone believes about this person, he is a human. He is a father, he is a son, and he has been a friend to many. The life sentence is mandatory, but to do consecutive sentences, I think, is inappropriate and is inhumane. Anytime there is a death, a murder, a loss of life, it is horrible, whether it's a loved one or a stranger. And the legislature has provided, regardless of our disagreement, that a life sentence without parole is mandatory. But that does not negate that he is a human being. And I don't think sentencing him to on and after time is appropriate. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. What he was convicted of were atrocious acts. We've heard from her family, we've heard from her friends. Their pain is unimaginable, and I'm not demeaning that, but I have the opportunity to speak for Brian today. And I'm asking the court to sentence him in line with the guidelines and with the purpose of sentencing: punishment, justice, prevention of future crimes, consecutive sentences. That's excessive and it doesn't meet those needs. So I'd ask the court to adopt the defendant's sentencing recommendation.
Just want to put on the record that the defendant, in making its argument with regard to the inhumane aspect of any consecutive sentences, cited to a case in its brief, Donovan. And Donovan does not apply to this case. As an initial matter, Donovan related to a larceny involving a single act that resulted in 7 different victims being victimized. The SJC, that was I think a 1985 case. The appellate courts in Massachusetts have long since distinguished Donovan, even in the case of larcenies, which is not the case that's before me, to recognize that even Donovan relates only to a single act case and not one with one purpose. As you could argue, there was one purpose here, but more than one discrete offense. So I'm not persuaded by the logic of Donovan, even if it applied to this case, and even if it was as broad-reaching as the defense suggests in its sentencing memo, which the court finds it is not.
I'm going to fast forward through some of this is just waiting time.
Your behavior and you pled guilty is no task. There is no task facing a judge that is more important or more difficult than crafting an appropriate sentence. The legislature mandates that the only appropriate sentence for the jury's verdict, murder in the first degree, is life in prison without the possibility of parole. That sentence is immensely appropriate and just, given your murderous acts and the life trauma that you've inflicted upon your own children. As to counts 2 and 3, I have wide discretion in sentencing. I want to state my rationale for your sentences on those 2 counts on the record now. I have considered various factors with regard to my sentence for counts 2 and counts 3, to which you pled guilty on November 18th, 2025. Specifically, I've considered the severity of the crimes, their nature and circumstances, and your role in those crimes, the need to deter others from committing comparable crimes, and your prior criminal record, namely your federal fraud case. As to the latter, your criminal history shows a long and well-documented history of deceitful and manipulative behavior. I've considered your character or lack thereof, your behavior, and your background. With regard to the nature and circumstances of the offenses, as to indictment 002, in the approximately 4 hours of interviews spanning 4 days, you concocted a detailed, completely fabricated story of what happened to Ana Walshe on January 1st, 2023, in order to cover up your murder of her and disposal of her body. Your lies triggered a multi-day, extensive missing persons investigation. A command center was set up in Cohassett and was manned by various law enforcement, to include the Cohassett Police Department and the Massachusetts State Police. And local and Massachusetts resources were deployed to Washington, D.C. to investigate at Ana's home. Because of your lies, thousands of hours of investigative resources were wasted and diverted from other deserving cases and investigations. As to the nature and circumstances of count 3, the improper disposal of Ana Walshe's body, the seriousness of your acts cannot be overstated. Your acts in dismembering your wife's body and disposing of her remains in multiple area dumpsters can only be described as barbaric and incomprehensible. You had no regard for the lifelong mental harm that your criminal acts inflicted on your then 2, 4, and 6-year-old sons, not only in taking their mother, but also, as is specific to this charge, in never being able to properly grieve that loss, to say goodbye to their mom. And I hear today the same is equally true of a sister who never was able to say a proper goodbye to her sister, a mother who never was able to say a proper goodbye to her daughter, and many friends who had the same loss. As to indictments 2 and 3, I have considered the sentencing guidelines, the aggravating factors. There are no mitigating factors in this case. And I also sought out and considered information from the Massachusetts Sentencing Commission, again, which I shared with the parties earlier this week, in particular sentencings in 2022 and 2023 of defendants who were convicted of murder and or voluntary manslaughter, along with a Chapter 268, Section 13B conviction. This is not a guideline case. Finally, as to the first-degree murder conviction, I have considered the loss of the life of an innocent, remarkable woman, Ana Walshe, and its devastating impact on her children, as relayed to me in the letter from DCF, her family, as relayed to me in her sister's victim impact statement today, friends in their victim impact statements, and the community. In the trial testimony of Jem Mutlu and Alyssa Kirby, a little bit of Ana Walshe, her warm, powerful, and embracing spirit came to life in this historic courtroom. I have carefully listened to the moving victim impact statement, to the oral written sentencing arguments made by the Commonwealth and by Mr. Walshe. It's clear to me that Ana was a bright light in the lives of many people. She lifted people up. I am sure that nothing I say and no sentence I can impose, even a life sentence, will lessen the grief that Ana Walshe's family, her mother, sister, and 3 boys, extended like family, confidants, friends, and others have endured and will continue to endure. Although I consider the letter of Diana Walshe, I simply cannot reconcile the person Diana Walshe describes in her letter with the person who stands before me for sentence. Mr. Walshe, you can stand. Mr. Walshe, you will live with the guilt and burden of Ana Walshe's death for the rest of your life. As to count 1, the jury having convicted you of murder in the 1st degree, I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As to indictment 2, lying to the police in connection with the investigation of a life felony, I sentence you to no less than 19 years, no more than 20 years, the statutory maximum, in prison to be served consecutive to the life sentence in 001. The legislature caps the maximum sentence for the improper disposal of a body at 3 years in state prison. As to indictment 003, the improper disposal of the body of your wife, Ana Walshe, I sentence you to no less than 2 years, 364 days, and no more than 3 years in state prison to run consecutive to the sentences in 001 and 002. I want to make one other notation with regard to the sentences that I'm giving today. Earlier in this case, I identified that there was an error in Mr. Walsh's III. That error persists to today. Specifically, so the record is clear, as I understand Mr. Walsh's prior federal sentence, he was sentenced to 37 months in federal prison. That sentence was to run concurrent with any state sentence that was given in this case. This morning, I asked probation to run his III again, and it is still incorrect. It is showing a 5-year probationary sentence. At my direction, the probation department in the last month, or perhaps a little bit longer, contacted the federal probation office in Boston to correct what I think is an obvious error in his III. It has not been corrected, and it stands still today as showing 5 years of probation as the sentence. To the extent that confuses anything in my sentencing, I want the record to reflect that, again, it's my understanding he was sentenced to 37 months in federal prison to run concurrent with this sentence that I'm now imposing today. Madam Clerk, you may impose the sentence.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Walsh, a jury having returned a guilty verdict on charge 1, murder in the first degree, you were sentenced to the state prison for the term of your natural life. Count 2, witness intimidation, you having entered a guilty plea to that, sir, you're sentenced to 19 years, not less than 19, not more than 20 years, to run from and after your life sentence on count 1. On count 3, improper disposal of a body, you're sentenced to not less than 2 years and 364 days and not more than 3 years to run from and after the sentence on count 2. You will receive 1,076 days credit for time deemed served while awaiting the disposition of this matter. All fees and fines in this matter are waived. You're all set, Mr. Walsh. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel.
After he is escorted out of the court, let me play one more video for you just because it's satisfying to see him get into the...
Goodbye.
That was not me. That was the Law and Crime Network saying the goodbye. So give me just 1 second and I'm going to find this other video just because it is satisfying to watch him be put into the police vehicle. I'm not sure why there's no sound on it.
You regret what you did. Mr. Walsh, you have any remorse? Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. All right. Appreciate it.
I don't know, but I just found that to be satisfying. Good to see you. Thanks, everybody. I'm not sure why he wasn't in jail garb for sentencing, but he did have his handcuffs and leg shackles on there. And I'm not really sure why they allowed him to have his regular street clothes on. I just want to take one quick second to thank you for being here today. If you're subscribed, thank you for that. About half the people that watch the videos on this channel are not subscribed, but if you enjoy true crime commentary that is a little bit more thoughtful and victim focused and prevention focused, I think you'll enjoy the channel. I do like to do deep dives and research over here, but I also have 2 other channels. And those of you who've been with me for a long time, you know about Ex-Mormon Snark. That's where my friend and I, Kirsten, every Monday night we go live, including tonight. We're going to be talking about how Mormons celebrate Christmas. We talk about our Mormon upbringing, and then on Thursdays we do videos about crazy Mormon beliefs and temple ceremonies. But you may not know that I have another channel as well, and it is called Megan Connor Meditation. It is a place for meditation and peaceful sleep stories, and I will show you the channel right now just so you can know what it looks like. And right now, all I have on there is a couple of shorts and my reading of A Christmas Carol, which I thought would be appropriate for the season. These are stories for sleep, but I'm also going to be posting meditations as well as affirmations and learning about peaceful communication. I wanted to have a peaceful place that was away from the true crime world. So if you would like to subscribe to that channel, I would really appreciate it. It is at Peaceful Communication here on YouTube, and you can also find it by looking for or searching Megan Connor Meditation. So I hope that'll be a good place for people to take a break from true crime. I also want to mention that tomorrow night or tomorrow during the day, I'm going to be releasing a video here on the Third Verse channel about Joseph Smith's very long rap sheet, his 42 arrests and all of the civil and criminal cases that he was involved in his life. My guest is Ganesh Cherian, who is the author of Joseph Smith, Architect of Mormonism, who wrote a topical biography on Joseph Smith. And then on Christmas Eve, I'm going to be appearing on a channel called Radio Free Mormon. He does a Christmas Eve special every year, and he's invited me to come and do a 10-minute segment. I really appreciated that channel the first year that I was without my Mormon faith, not knowing what to do with Christmas. And so I'm going to be appearing on that, doing a short little song. And then I'm also going to have a Christmas collection of music on my Patreon available starting on Christmas Eve day. I will do a live stream of that, and then it will be available throughout the season for Patreon members. And also, if you just want to purchase that one single episode, I'll have it for sale just as a single episode. So you don't have to sign up for a Patreon membership in order to enjoy the Christmas music. So I hope that you will join me for all of that fun that's coming up this week. Now, getting back to the Brian Walshe case, the trial, and domestic violence reporting in, just in general, I want to first share with you some statistics, because domestic violence doesn't always escalate to redrum, but sometimes it does. And there's actually a pattern that law enforcement can follow. And they have an assessment, and it's called now the name just went right out of my head. It's called the Lethality Risk Assessment for First Responders. And we'll go through that in detail as well. I just want to apologize in advance for my dog, who has decided that right now is the best time to eat his food right next to my desk. Just so you know, I feed my dogs in the morning, and sometimes this dog in particular, Loki, who is the dog of mischief, does not like to eat his food until I'm sitting here on a live stream. So I apologize for the crunching noises. But I want to share some statistics with you about domestic violence. According to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, about 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner. And that's in the United States. But it's over 10 million people every single year. And it affects everybody. It's not about socioeconomic status. It's not about race. It's 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men who are 18 or older who have been the victim of severe physical violence by an intimate partner. And I just reminded myself, I want to have this crawl on the screen. If you or somebody that you know is experiencing domestic violence in any way, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Please call 911 if you're in any kind of danger at all. You can also text START, the word START, to 88788 to have a more private conversation if you're afraid of being overheard. And also, if you need a place to stay away from somebody who you're afraid of, you can go to domesticshelters.org. They have locations all over the United States where you can go find a safe place to stay. These resources I'm going to keep up here on the crawl just for you guys to make sure that you have it. And if you know somebody or suspect that somebody is in a DV situation, please help them find these resources, as definitely when somebody starts to hold good boundaries or push back, or especially if they're leaving a situation, that is the most dangerous time. According to the CDC, research shows that intimate partner violence, and specifically homicide, is often the culmination of a pattern of abuse and coercion and control. So a lot of times people will minimize the difficult circumstances in their relationship because it's not all classified as physical abuse. Sometimes they dismiss the coerciveness and the control as not really part of the problem. And I want to share an article with you from the Second Step blog, which talks about this in detail. It talks a little bit about domestic violence crossing every boundary. This case was a well-resourced, professionally connected couple living in an affluent suburb. And so it sort of breaks the stereotype that domestic violence only happens in poorer communities. But it's important, they say, to talk about everyday survivors from marginalized communities are unalived by partners with far less public attention or outrage. The inequity influences which stories we hear and which lives are centered and which forms of violence remain overlooked. And this is a big, big problem because this case obviously was very, very well publicized. And that we know that there are hundreds and thousands of other stories just like this that don't get covered because they're marginalized people or because the victim is not necessarily somebody who media wants to cover because it's not as sensational. But I want to talk about this. The minimization is dangerous and common. This article says another pattern we see playing out is the minimization of escalating harm. When violence doesn't fit our expectations, people often grasp for explanations that feel more palatable. They label it as marital conflict, miscommunication, a moment of stress. The public narrative gets softened. The warning signs get reframed as merely red flags instead of danger. But minimization is not neutral. It allows abuse to continue unchallenged. It subtly teaches survivors to question their own perception and discourages bystanders from taking early signs of danger seriously. Cases like this remind us that domestic violence rarely begins with a single explosive act. It typically escalates through patterns of control that become more dangerous over time and are often hidden in plain sight. So I just want to share a couple of other statistics with you before we get to that risk assessment. According to the nation's Office on Drug and Crime, around 47,000 women and girls were unalived by intimate partners or family members in 2020 alone. In the U.S., the Violence Policy Center reports that cases where females were unalived by males in the relationships and the relationship was known to people, 62% of them were wives, ex-wives, or girlfriends of the offenders. 75% of domestic violence-related redrums happen when the victim tries to separate from their abuser. And that's why I said that leaving can be the most dangerous time. And there are certain behaviors that signal extreme risk, like strangulation or choking, which increases the likelihood of homicide by 750%. That should terrify everybody. If your partner has ever done that or threatened to do that or used any kind of a weapon, those are red flags that you cannot ignore. So now I want to go directly to this risk assessment and share it with you. As I went over this questionnaire, considering the Brian Walshe case, Ana Walshe could have answered yes to 8 of the 19 questions that I know of. There are other things that I don't know that I couldn't answer, but out of 19 questions, if 8 of them are answered in the affirmative, then that is an incredibly high risk. The other thing to note is that if you can answer yes to even 3 of these questions, you're at risk. But again, that statistic that I reported earlier, that any time that there was strangulation involved in any way, it increases the likelihood of homicide by 750%. That is a huge thing that I think people need to know more of. And I'm going to put the link to that article right here in the chat. And I'll also show it on screen so that people watching this afterwards can see that and go to it. I'm also going to put a link to this assessment in the show notes so that people can go to it and answer it privately. A lot of times it takes a victim a long time to come to the realization that they're actually being abused and that what's happening to them is not okay, because we become desensitized to it and we become used to it. We see it as normal. So the first question is, has the abuser ever been arrested or convicted of domestic violence, hostage taking, stalking, or abduction? Does the abuser have a history of domestic violence, hostage taking, stalking, or abduction? Do you know whether the abuser has any violent history towards others? Now, sorry guys, Now I'm gonna answer these questions in accordance with what we know about the Brian Walshe case up to the research that I've done up to this point. So has he been arrested or convicted? Up to the point that, before Ana's disappearance, he had not yet been arrested. But he did have a history of stalking, and we talked about that when Ana had gone on her trip to go see her mother. He had texted and called her multiple times and kept track of her location. And that's something that can be classified as stalking. It is certainly classified as coercive control. Then, do you know whether the abuser has any violent history towards others? Well, that we do know because there was a report by the family friend during Brian Walshe's, when his father passed away, and he was taking over the estate of his father. There were some people who were going to arrest him, and this family friend reported that Brian used a stanchion, which is kind of like, it can be sort of like a hat stand or something, to try and hit the people who were going to arrest him at that point. So he does have a violent history. Then, has the abuser expressed thoughts or threats to harm or kill you? Well, he did. He threatened to unalive Ana and her friend in 2014 before they got married. And Ana made a police report about it, and nothing ever came of it. They eventually got married about a year and a half later. 5, does the abuser have access to firearms or ever used or threatened to use a firearm against you? That one I don't know the answer to. Number 6, has the abuser ever threatened to use or used another weapon or object to harm you? Again, I don't know that definitively, but the landlord did say that there were signs that there were altercations going on in the house, things like holes in the wall and damage to the structure of the house. And there was even, I think, a bullet hole in one of the floorboards. So I'm going to answer yes to that because it sounded like there were a lot of other things that were happening in the house. Does the abuser have a criminal history of the use of weapons? That one is a no, as far as I know. Number 8, has the abuser ever used his or her hands or an object to choke, strangle, or suffocate you? We don't know the answer to that question. Number 9, does the abuser have a history of arson or threats of arson? We don't know, but I do have to say the home that the Walshes were staying in was on fire about, I don't know, a week or so after this happened. It turned out to be quote unquote unrelated, or at least the police couldn't find any relation to it. I do think it is an odd coincidence, and I don't really believe in coincidences, but I'm going to leave that one unchecked for now. Does the abuser accuse you of infidelity? Yes. Well, Ana was having an affair, but a lot of abusers make that accusation all the time, even though, whether there's an affair happening or not. 12, does the abuser monitor or control your activities, where you go, who you interact with, or what you do? I would say yes to this one because when she was unresponsive, he would escalate in his number of calls and texts to her all the time. So he was trying to be controlling about where she was and when she was coming back. Does the abuser isolate you from family, friends, and community life? I would say yes to this one because it was hard for Ana to communicate with her mother. Sometimes she wasn't able to communicate with her friends. Brian was insisting that she not spend another holiday away from the family. Thank you, Angel Eyes, so much for being here. And thank you guys also for being kind to each other in the chat. This is a good point, Music Nerd. Hello, Loki. Now please get down. You're not allowed. Music Nerd says, I help women flee from abusive partners, and trust me when I say they come from all kinds of backgrounds. What's common is the after violence and economic violence from the spouse trying to control. And yes, it's so true and so telling. And if you are so inclined, I would love to have an email from you because I would love to talk with you more about this and find out what more I can do here on the channel to help and support women who are trying to escape. I'm going to let my dogs out. Give me one second. Okay, thank you so much for that pause for the dogs. Okay, so back to our assessment. Number 14, is the abuser severely depressed, seeing little hope to live life? I don't know the answer to that question. He didn't ever seem depressed to me, even when he was on camera at the Home Depot, checking himself out and fixing his hair. Is the abuser unemployed? Yes. We know that he had been on trial for his art fraud case, and he didn't seem to have a regular occupation other than just grifting. 16, has there been a recent escalation of the abuser's violence or risk behavior? I would say yes. If he's escalating into art fraud, that's risk behavior. And also there was an escalation in him sort of cracking down on where Ana was and what she was doing. And so in my opinion, that constitutes an escalation. And then 17, does the use of alcohol or drugs by the abuser exacerbate the violence or abuse? I don't know the answer to this question. There didn't seem to be abusing alcohol or drugs in Brian's history, but I don't know for sure, so I'm going to leave that one unanswered. Has the abuser ever threatened or tried to self-harm? Again, I don't know the answer to that. And then, has the abuser been violent outside the home or in a public place? I think the answer to that question is no. And so if we go back and we look at our yeses, the ones that we know of at least, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yeses out of 19, which is a huge red flag. That's, about half on there. And so I would definitely call that a problem. Although if you or somebody that you know is going through this assessment, they say that you should contact help and start making police reports if you answer yes to even 3 of these questions, because it can increase your risk. Finally, I wanted to just show you guys, because Ana Walshe's Instagram is public, I wanted to show you this picture that she posted in 2018. Now, 2014 is when she made the report of Brian threatening to kill her and her friend. They got married in 2015, and then she posted this picture in 2018. You can clearly see a bruise and a cut above her left eye. And she did not really offer an explanation on this post. She just said mild concussion, bruised hip, and a cut, #vulnerability. I certainly hope that after this post, she had friends reach out to her and ask her what happened and ask her if she was okay. I don't know if that happened or not, because we don't really have any record of any of that. But when somebody is willing to publicly post a picture of themselves in this kind of vulnerable, where they've obviously experienced some kind of violence, we cannot just ignore it and say, gee, I hope they're okay. So I really wanted to, the reason I waited so long to do this recap of Brian Walshe's sentencing is because I wanted to present this information about escalating domestic violence and how dangerous it is, and how important it is for us to recognize these warning signs in our friends and our loved ones, and to help other people find the resources that they need and get the help that they need to get out of those situations. As I mentioned before, the time when somebody is leaving this kind of a relationship is the time when it is the most dangerous for them. But there are resources for help, and they've been crawling along the screen here this whole time. There's the National Domestic Violence Hotline, as well as you can text the word START to 88788 to start getting help from licensed professionals who have the resources to plug you into. If you need a place to go, or you or somebody that you love needs a place to go, a place to stay, you can look at domesticshelters.org. And you can also get that from the National Domestic Violence Hotline as well. They will plug you into a place. They don't list the addresses purposely to protect people. And so they can get you to a safe house, and they also sometimes will pay for hotel or motel rooms just until they can get you into a more stable situation. Thank you, Music Nerd, for all your sharing here. Most DV doesn't occur in public. It happens behind closed doors. If someone is violent in public, dare to act. Then it happens at home too. Yeah, if they're doing something in public, if you witness something in public, you can imagine what they're willing to do behind closed doors. If you're in public, you can call 911 and you can report it. Even if you don't know the person or the couple. I was in Costco one time and I saw something happen, and I was too shocked and stunned that that happened in public to do anything about it. But now I know that I can just call 911 standing right there and make a report about it. The more these things are reported, the more likely it is for people to be protected. And even if it's never happened before, or you don't think it's ever going to happen again, always report it and get it documented, especially the person's name and description, because then if they move on to another partner, there's already documentation on the books. More reports save lives. And so I'm also, yes, John Smith, thinking about Gabby Petito. I'm thinking about so many other women that I know who have been in dangerous situations, who were not so lucky and who were not able to get out. And I put Ana Walshe in that same classification, that she was a survivor of DV that unfortunately did not get to escape. And so I want to call more awareness to this. I want people to be aware of the warning signs and of that risk assessment that people can do. If I had taken that risk assessment at the height of my difficult situation, I could have answered yes to 9 of those questions as well. And I should have gotten out a lot sooner. And I was very, very lucky that nothing worse happened to myself or my kids. So I just want to encourage everybody out there to keep an eye out for these warning signs, to check on your people. And if you think that something is off, please have that hard conversation of what's really going on. Help them see it from an outsider's perspective, because sometimes they get so into it every single day that they don't see it as harmful. Thank you for this, Jesse Roblin. My wife and I worked at the last Canadian federal election as polling supervisors. She had a husband rip the ballot out of his wife's hand to make sure she voted the way he wanted. He was reported. I'm so glad that that he was reported, and thank you for sharing that with us. It gives us, a little bit of empowerment when we hear of other people making reports. It makes us feel safe to do the same thing. And so I just want to encourage you that if you see something, say something. If you know somebody where you think the situation is not healthy, please have that conversation with them. And if you yourself are in one of these situations, please use the resources at the crawl below to get the help that you need. In addition, my email is open at any time, askmegan with 2 E's @gmail.com. I'm happy to be a victim, an advocate for victims. I'm happy to help plug people into resources. If there are questions or if anybody needs resources for themselves, I'm happy to help you out. And yes, please call 911, make those reports, and let us hope that we can prevent things like this from happening again. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing and supporting me and my channels. I appreciate you guys, and I hope to see you again before Christmas Day. I hope to see you over on some of my other channels, or else right here tomorrow with my Joseph Smith episode. But if I don't see you before then, please have a very Merry Christmas. Take care of yourselves. Do the thing that is the most loving for you, and have a wonderful evening.